Okay, we're here with Ben McKenzie from Gotham, and I want to start off by asking Ben, you entered the world of Gotham years before Batman ever dons his cape. Bruce Wayne becomes the Dark Knight of the city. What's it like entering a world that we all, or so many people know so well, but at a time that hasn't been fully fleshed out on screen before?
Um, well, it's fascinating to enter that mythology, which I think kind of seeps into kind of the consciousness of the entire culture, not just American culture, but sort of global culture. I mean, the Batman mythos is so prevalent in almost every. I mean, you can walk down the street in almost any major city in any country in the world, and you'll see kids wearing Batman shirts. Not only kids, but grown men and women wearing that logo on their chest, and um, that just is an indication of how popular this story is. And so to see it, like you said, at its origins that haven't been explored on film before, and certainly not on television, is an interesting sort of it's an interesting take on a world that we're all very familiar with. I think it's sort of both exciting and terrifying at the same time. People are very protective of Batman and the assorted characters in that world, and we all felt the weight of that while starting the job. We all wanted to do it right, and I think so far so good. But that's the constant challenge: is to keep the quality up, keep the authenticity and the intentions pure.
What had been your sort of experience with Batman before entering this project? I know you voiced him in Batman Year One, an old video release from a couple of years ago. But
Yeah.
so other than that, where you actually got to play Batman in something,
Yeah.
what was your experience too with just Batman as a kid growing up or as a young adult?
Yeah, I'm probably like a lot of people of my age. I'm in my mid-30s, and I grew up watching the old Adam West Batman on rerun in the afternoons in Texas with my brother when we got home from school, and I loved that. That was a lot of fun. And then the Tim Burton Batmans were my first experience with the film, the film versions, everyone's first experience. And they were, definitely impactful. I remember absolutely loving, particularly the first two, and loving. I mean, Michael Keaton actually, loving Michael Keaton as Batman. I mean, I always, of course, love Christian Bale too, but Michael Keaton as Batman was sort of the Batman that I always kind of had in my mind when I was growing up. And then, I guess, cut forward, 20 years, and I got to do the voice of Batman for this animated film, and Bryan Cranston was the voice of Gordon, which was a hoot, and to be a part of that was just a hell of a lot of fun. And never did I think that this would lead to Gotham, and I don't think it really directly did. They're all part of the Warner Brothers DC sort of family, but it's a real sort of fascinating thing to be able to play Jim Gordon and have some familiarity with at least an adult Batman and the oops, I lost my picture on you. Still there?
Oh no, Can you see? I can
Can you
hear
see?
and see you.
Okay, well that's the most important.
Yes,
Hopefully you'll
that is
come back.
definitely the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun, and I think it gave me a little bit of insight maybe into Batman's or Bruce's, I guess, psychology, and so maybe that's helpful when acting out these scenes with David Masoos, who plays the 12-year-old Bruce. You can imagine sort of see the seeds sown for future vengeance and retaliation.
Mm. Do you think there's a version of Batman that's been done in the past that you as an actor draw on, or that the series creators are drawing on to create this sort of very unique style and or the very distinct style and tone of this series?
I mean, I think it would probably draw more on the comic book versions than any filmed version, because the filmed versions, obviously they vacillated pretty wildly in tone. I mean, everything from like, the filmmakers involved, like Burton, and then there was Schumacher, and and now obviously Nolan. The styles were pretty different. This harkens back to more of a noir aesthetic, and so more of like maybe sort of Frank Miller-esque treatment, or something like Gotham Central, of course. I've been able to do a little research since we started the job on the various incarnations of Batman, particularly Gordon, over the years, and I think it definitely harkens back to more of a noir stylized thing. It's set in the undetermined past. It's set in the past of our unconsciousness. The past. Bruno Heller, who created the show, has a great sort of phrase of it's the dreams and nightmares of everyone. A 6-year-old boy and a 60-year-old man all mashed together. So it's sort of real, and it's at the same time utterly surreal. That's the most complicated answer I can give you. I hope that works.
We're probably not going to see the iPhone 6 Plus in Gotham.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd break the thing. Yeah. Did you ever see the 90s Emmy-winning animated series of Batman? Because I think there's a lot of similarities in the style there.
Yeah, a lot of people have remarked upon that. I've only seen little snippets. I need to find the time to watch it all together, but a lot of people have remarked on that. And from what I've seen, which hasn't been a lot, it does have a lot. It probably does owe quite a bit to that. It's funny. I mean, over 75 years, you start to realize when you get into this how many different ways it's been interpreted, and by how many different people. Artists and illustrators, writers, but obviously when you get into the filmed versions, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people have worked on various incarnations of these, probably at this point hundreds of thousands of people, and in some form or fashion. And so it's this ever-evolving, ever-changing thing. So to pick one specific influence is almost impossible. It's always going to be a process that involves collaboration and reference points that some of which you might not even be aware of, until somebody points it out, like you just did.
And let's talk a bit about your character now, Detective Gordon, not yet Commissioner Gordon, and with that character, a character that's so well known, we've seen so many iterations of that character over the years. What's it like for you as an actor entering that with just so many different images and ideas already in people's heads about this character, about this performance? How do you approach that?
Well, I was intimidated, and so I reached out to Jeff Johns, who I had met before at DC, and asked him to send me some material, which he did, and then we went to lunch, and I asked him, what does this all mean, all of this stuff that you sent me, including, well, I had already read Year One, but Gotham Central and Long Halloween, and he just sent me a bunch of different stuff, and he said, well, it's helpful for you perhaps to have some sense of the scope of it, but at the end of the day, we've cast you for a reason. We think that you're right for this part, and you have to throw everything else aside and attack it like you would any other part. And so that's what I've done. I mean, I don't think it's very helpful just simply as an actor flipping over into sort of how actors work. I don't think it's very helpful to try to do an imitation of somebody, to try and I think all you can do is work with your given circumstances, understand exactly who you think this guy is at his core based on the information that you have, which a lot of which comes out in the pilot, which is that Jim's father was a revered DA in Gotham. His father died tragically in front of him. Jim then grew up outside of Gotham itself, in the country, with his mother, and then ends up returning to Gotham some 20 years later, having served in the military. So he's a military man. He has a very sort of strong belief in right and wrong, and an intense personality, which is all driven to sort of seeking justice, and that is going to come into direct conflict, of course, with the city he finds himself in. Gotham is a fallen land full of corrupt people from all sides of the law. Those who are clearly criminals, and those who are supposedly protecting the peace, but are actually bought out by the criminal elements involved. So everybody's on the take. Everybody is untrustworthy. There is no morality, basically, and Jim is thrown into that, having to create it on the fly and having to find out how to get things done. So it's a great premise for a show, and I think that's plenty of information to start with for Jim, and then as the seasons roll on, we will be able to dig deeper and find different things, different specific things that have happened in his life. But that's sort of the crux of it. Military man, trying to take up his father's mantle, believing his father was this pure, justice seeker, realizing very quickly his father wasn't actually who he thought he was, and yet trying to find justice in an unjust world.
Has there been a scene you've gotten to play as Jim that you thought was particularly challenging or particularly interesting for that character?
Well, there are a lot. I would say there's a lot of them. The ones that are most heightened, of course, are the ones that, maybe not of course, some of the ones that are most heightened really involve Jim's relationship with Bruce. And it's fascinating because, of course, it doesn't fall into any of the neat categories that you would like to assign it. It's not simply of course, there's a cop and a young boy who's been the victim of this terrible crime, but it's not as simple as I'm the veteran and he is I'm the elder statesman and he is the young boy. He, of course, is incredibly smart and incredibly powerful, given who his family is, and so there's an element of Jim being the knight serving at the discretion of the boy prince. There's this strange power dynamic where Bruce actually effectively has more power than Jim, far more power than Jim could ever seek, given his position, but at the same time he's a child, and he has to be taught things, and he has to learn things, quite frankly, the hard way. And so the scenes with David Mazouz, who plays Bruce, and with Sean Pertwee, who plays Alfred, often those scenes are a threesome. They are, I don't know, they really sort of harken back to me to sort of the essence of what the show is thematically. A lot of these conversations are about justice, power, Batman to me has at its core has to me it's always felt like, people would get different things out of it. To me, it's always felt like, what would it be like if we could actually get vengeance on the people that wronged us? If we could actually, dress up in this cape, have access to all kinds of, incredible gadgetry. If money were no object and we could do anything that we wanted, who would we get vengeance on, and how would that feel, and how would that affect us and the world? It's a dangerous proposition, exhilarating but dangerous. And so I think those scenes really kind of harken to that, and those are fun to play.
Obviously, one of the great things about the universe of Gotham is the like great linear villains that there are like in the city and in the Batman universe. What is there a particular villain you're excited with the origins story of that we've either started to see or haven't seen yet?
Well, you're going to see a lot in the first season. You've already seen some, but as we get further into the show, I think we're realizing that the mythology is so deep and rich that each villain, almost every villain, should have resonance in the larger mythology. We shouldn't. Earlier on in the first couple of episodes, we sort of experimented with doing villains that weren't quite really from the mythology. They sort of felt like they might be, but they weren't. We're realizing that we should just go full bore into these iconic villains. Some of them are going to be the parents of the people who will actually become the villains, because of course we're talking 20 or 30 years before these villains really emerge. So we're doing episodes right now which I think are really great that involve the Scarecrow, and I think, or I should say, someone who has a lot of influence on who will become the Scarecrow, put it that way. And we're getting into an interesting sort of interesting observations about the psychology of this particular villain, and it's fascinating. I've always thought Scarecrow using manipulating people's fear levels and trying to understand what they're most afraid of in order to control them is always a fascinating kind of character and an interesting exercise for an actor playing that, and I think the psychology is really interesting. So Scarecrow this year, I love the Riddler. I don't know. I'm weird. I've always loved the Riddler. God, there are a lot, and we will hopefully have time to get into a lot of them. But this year is most focused on Penguin, and Robin Taylor's playing him brilliantly. So this year will most likely will be focused on Penguin, and then subsequent years will branch out into other things.
Would you ever on Gotham like to see a time jump or flash forwards to, or do you think it's best if it just stays in the sort of prequel sort of time setting?
I don't want to see those. I would like it to stay where it is. I think if you were going to do that, I would say only do that much later. I think it's in some senses, if you step back from it, I think it's somewhat of a brilliant but simple jump to go back to an origin story for these characters. But at the same time, I think it does take a lot of imagination if you're not intimately familiar with the universe. It takes a minute for the audience to get its head around it, and so I would spend time in the present, our Gotham's present, the past of what most people are familiar with, and just stay there. And I would not only would I not jump forward and give flash forwards, I also wouldn't jump back and do flashbacks as to where Jim was and all that. I prefer to stay in the present. That's more of like me as a like my storytelling narrative taste is more flashbacks to me are always clunky. Flash forwards are clunky to me. Stay in the present. You can always figure out a way to tell those stories to give hints of what is to be or what came before without having to just settle, in my opinion, for flash forwards or flashbacks. But that's my personal take. I don't know if Bruno. I think Bruno probably shares that, and Danny Cannon. But yeah, who knows? We'll see. Never say never.
Yeah, and I guess you're no stranger to television with the OC and with Southland. How is this show different to the other two that you've done? What's particularly, what's something that you enjoy that's different about this one?
Well, one of the things I enjoy is that it is so heightened. It's the world that they have constructed around us, and in some sense, I mean, physically, literally, just constructed the sets that we have. The beautiful costumes that we wear, the intricate lighting, and the smoke in almost every shot in the background, giving a kind of a moody air to it. Whenever we shoot outside on the streets, they're all watered down to give that kind of glistening noir feel. All of those production elements really give you a sense of acting in a stylized movie, and that's a real treat. It was not something that I thought all that much about before we actually entered production, and then of course I saw what they were doing, and I thought, oh yeah, of course, that's how you would do it. I guess I'm so, as actors, you kind of sort of put on blinders and you sort of go straight into your character, and you sort of hope that all the other elements come together, but you have no real ability to control what the show looks like visually. That's really Danny Cannon, the director of the pilot and our executive producer. That's really his job. And so I would say all of that, the heightened nature of all of it, from production to the writing to the characterizations, is really fun and wildly different from what I did in Southland, which was much more what we did. Southland was, almost sort of verite style, handheld, rough and tumble, no lights or almost no lights, almost no anything. It was all like you were watching an episode of Cops, the reality series. And then, the OC was a soap opera, so it was all sort of, trying to be as trying to be as soapy as you wanted to be. I don't know. It was a different thing completely. So this has been fun. It's fun. Yeah.
And I just wanted to finish by asking, you've obviously, you alluded to before, a very passionate, invested fan base into the Gotham and Batman universe, and you can answer this either way. Has there been a particular thing a fan or some fans have told you they particularly like about what you're doing, or particularly don't like about what you're doing?
I mean, I really haven't gotten anywhere near. I sort of always expected that when you're on a stage this big, there will be hecklers and there will be people kind of saying, you're screwing this all up. And, I'm somewhat on social media. I have Twitter and Instagram. And so I kind of braced myself for more of a backlash, I guess. And I've been shocked at how few people are out there. I mean, there's always a random person on Twitter who's probably on some substances and is like tweeting at you, you're like in the worst grammar ever, kind of, you're the worst Gordon I've ever, sort of drunkenly or whatever. But everybody's been pretty amazingly positive. I mean, to be honest, I get a thrill out of kids getting into it and liking it, because I think it just sort of breaks you from all of the stresses of your adult life, and you realize that you're kind of living a child's dream doing this. And so when kids have been on set, there's been a couple of it's usually young boys. They kind of look at you, if they're young enough, they have a little bit of difficulty separating you from the character, obviously. So they kind of look at you as though you are this, formidable future leader of a police department or something, and they say things like, I'm really glad that you're doing what's right, that you're getting these guys and you're holding up justice, and you're helping Bruce, and and it's really, I don't know, it makes me all teary-eyed. It makes me all, it's very sweet, and I like the fact that Jim is an old-fashioned hero. He is not an anti-hero. In an age of anti-heroes, he is almost the furthest thing from that. He's just an old-fashioned guy who is going to get things done, and get them done hopefully the right way. And I think for kids to see that and to be able to aspire to that is a good thing for the world. So whatever little sliver I have of responsibility in that, I'm happy about it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ben. We wish you. Gotham is about to enter its sort of first awards cycle with Golden Globes and Screen Actors Guilds and stuff. So we wish you all the best for that. And thanks for talking with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
No worries. Did I ever come back? Did my face ever like?
No, I haven't seen you for like 20 minutes. It's really weird.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I can't figure it out. It just conked out. I know. Namaste, my friend.
oh well, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Ben. But there's worse things in the world than losing my
Yeah.
face. Have a good one, man. Bye.
All right, man. You too. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, well.